Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Chapter 5 is going to be in regards to social groups and formal organizations. When we're looking at the formal organizations and how we look at social groups, we tend to put ourselves into different categories of groups. We put ourselves into primary, secondary groups. We put ourselves into in groups and out of groups and reference groups and social groups. So when we're looking at all of this and when we're putting ourselves into it, our primary group is mainly put in front of us as family and friends. This is what we kind of produce a mirror within. This is the group that we want to imitate the most. We want to have this really intent, close bond relationships with. We want to be able to understand how these groups' characteristics imitate long-term face-to-face relationships, right? These are those primary hardcore groups that we have. Um, these are they play key roles with our families. They play a role in developing ourselves. As a small group, the family also serves as a buffer. Um, Often intend threatening larger groups, also known as society. This is kind of where we feel more comfortable in regards to who we could open up to, talk, be ourselves. We don't feel judged. We don't feel like we have this um, demeanor in regards to where we have to hide an identity or pretend like we are somebody else. We're able to be ourselves. The family has been of primary significance in forming the basic orientation of this couple. Here is their daughter. Learned in, I want to say, the previous chapter, or will be learning in future chapters in regards to family group sizes. And when you have a dyad is a single group of two people. It's the smallest group possible. And then when you start adding on to it, then the relationships tend to grow and they get a little stronger. And, they build different types of relationships. So those are primary groups. Secondary groups are larger, they're formal, and they're impersonal. They may be subdivided into primary groups. If you have a large group that you tend to hang around a lot, you might be subdivided into a primary group that you feel a little bit closer with. Excuse me. That you feel more comfortable with, and you kind of associate with them a little bit more, and you feel a little bit more comfortable with them. So those secondary groups can become primary groups, but for the most part, they're larger, they're formal, and they're really impersonal. They're not face to face. So they're just more some interest or activity type aspects of groups. When we're talking about groups, we kind of put them in different kind of categories. And the reason why we put them in categories is because we're able to subject them by people, objects, events that have similar characteristics and are classified together. For all purposes, it's simply for statistics purpose. When we're talking about category, it's simply for statistics. It's just something that we're able to break down into smaller groups, right? If we're talking about a primary group, secondary group, when we start talking about voluntary associations, these are bigger groups, so we're able to categorize them down into smaller aspects. Once again, primary group is known as people experience intimate, long-term face-to-face associations. Primary group, right? We're talking about voluntary associations. These are groups made up of people who volunteer, organize, and on the basis of some mutual interest. These are also known as voluntary memberships. They're also known as voluntary organizations. They have inner circles. Inside these inner circles are key members who grow distant from ranking and file, right? There's a hierarchy within them. When you're looking at the veterans foreign wars, the VFW, that has an inner circle. There's rankings within it. There's people that run the inner circle that are key members who grow the distance from rank of a file. So you have a president, you have a vice president, you have those types of inner circles within it. That is a voluntary association, inner circle. When you're talking about the iron law, the iron law is more or less is how organizations come to be dominant by small self-perpetuating elites. So when you're talking about iron laws, they refer to how certain aspects of finding distributions about the people, circles, values, some interests, backgrounds, events, the way they look at things, the way how they kind of try to lock it all in, right? It was a Robert Michaels term. It was a tendency for, like I said, formal organizations to be dominant by a small self perpetuating elite. So one person leads it, that elite aspects. So when we're talking about that iron law, it's kind of in regards to who kind of has that aspects, that golden rule, more or less, that one person that kind of has the say to say yes or no to a lot of things. So those are the difference in between the two. So going back in our group is a group towards which one feels loyal to. It's the in group. Actually, we haven't even got to in group. That's my fault. Let me flip the screen, guys. Sorry. In groups and out groups. In groups, we feel loyalty. They shape our perception of wrong and right, right? We think of them as us. If you've ever heard of anybody talk about like a really close in-group primary group, it's always us, we, it's talking about togetherness. When you're talking about out groups, they feel antagonistic. They think of them as them. So like them over there, they do this. It's kind of one of the outside type aspects. So when we're looking at in groups, we're looking at the ones who feel loyal to us. When we're looking at it all together and we're trying to put it all into an aspects or in a term or in a way that we could kind of put this kind of in a nutshell, you have to look at it as they're all type of reference groups, right? It's family, neighborhoods, teachers, classmates. It's how we evaluate ourselves. It's the way how we tend to present ourselves to different areas and different aspects. We tend to act a certain way around our families. If we're around our neighbors, we act a different way. If we're around our teachers, if we're around our classmates, we have a different personality that comes out with in each situation. So it's how we evaluate ourselves, how we feel comfortable around these individuals. Do we feel like we could be a modernized person, or do we feel like we have to put on an act, right? That dramaturgy type aspects. Do we put on that front stage, persona? So by all means, references in regards to how we refer to how we evaluate ourselves. How do we communicate with everybody within these groups? Social networks is people linked together by one another. A way how you could look at or refer to social networking or social, aspects, you think of it as a spider web. When you're looking at it, it's how we're linked. If you know one person, that person knows somebody. If that person knows the 10 people, okay, now you know those 10 people because of acquaintances type aspects. So it's when you're looking at a social network, it's real quick to get your spider web into a really big, nice big web because of the inner links that you have with people. You also have these 6 degrees in regards to, you have these cliques, you have different levels in regards to like the how people perceive the phenomenon in regards to the world and how it should be. So you have like 6 degrees of separation though at the same time of this. And it just really depends in regards to how you want to persuade those 6 degrees. Do you want to put them in as a primary group, secondary group, reference group, in group, out group, as a voluntary association? They all have their different degrees of separation, but it really depends on regards to you. But when you're looking at social networks, the smallest part of social networking is our friends and acquaintances, the people we hang out with. This is a part of your social network. It overlaps with a core part of our reference groups. You can see how the reference groups and social networks of these youth are not likely to lead them into the same social distance as youth in the next photo. So as you see here, this is more of a college student probably study group type aspects, or at least they had a class together, maybe they're whatever, working on a project together, different type of social group. When you look at this one, this is a small part of social network of friends and acquaintances and stuff like that, but they take this to a different level of social destination. This is a different type of reference group. It's a different type of it has a different meaning in regards to social networks. So when you're building those bonds, your acquaintances, your friends and stuff like that, your social networking depends in regards to who you communicate with and how you communicate with them. So there's a different type of a bond in regards to these two different pictures. So if you look at this one, like I said, this is more like of a college students, even maybe even high school, doing their studies together, doing some type of research, maybe doing some type of a project together. And then you have this that just has a total different bond. A little different. Like I said, you could look at this one being more maybe of a clique, a cluster of people within a large group who choose to interact with one another. If you're from a large family, you still end up with cliques within a large family at family gatherings and stuff like that. It's, if you're from a Hispanic family, you'll get all the aunts in one corner, one corner talking all the chismes. That's a clique, no matter how you look at it. So, but it's still one of those things. It's still a social network, no matter how you kind of slice that pie. We have, before I get into the Buradic systems and stuff like that, we also have this small world phenomenon aspects in regards to on an academic myth. Milgrams did a study in regards to trying to find if the universities like Yale University libraries were more detailed in regards to their research, if they did, in regards to social networks and that type of aspects. What they ended up doing is that Milgram's study ended up actually stacking the deck in regards to the academic myth, in the favor of finding a small world, basically a phenomenon in regards to the certain aspects. People who didn't know one another were dramatically spared by the social barriers. Rather than living in small worlds, they live in a world that looks like a bowl of like clumpy oatmeal, kind of how they were comparing his research. So think of if you're inside this research bowl and you're being watched, are you going to act the same way knowing that you're being observed from the outside? No, you're going to change your behavior. So that's the reason why they kind of said he kind of stacked the deck, because he was watching them so much to the point of, it kind of, changed the way how this small world phenomenon research kind of came about. So in regards to the findings that end up coming out is that Milgram's sample and methods were flawed, but some subsequent research has come to similar conclusions. It's just the way how he did it, he just stacked it to where his research came out to be flawed. So kind of what you need to know in regards to the Stanley Milgram's research is that Milgram's sample and methods were flawed, but some subsequent research has come to similar conclusions. So just kind of know that that's kind of ending right before we go into the Buradic aspects. So the Buradic aspects in regards to characteristics, goal displacement, dysfunction in regards to Buradic system. When we're looking at the characteristics in regards to the Buradic C, and these are the characteristics, it's a formal organization with a hierarchy of authority, impersonality of positions, and written down procedures. That is a Buradic system. If you want to think about it in today's armies, no matter what country they are from, there's a Buradic C, right? They have a strict hierarchy of rank, division of labor, and personality and replaceability, right? Emphasis on the office, not only on the person's holding it, and the records, rules, and communications, right? These are essential characteristics. They were identified by Max Weber. And this was actually a picture taken in North Korea. I mean, they march in step, they march in dimes, they have their beat, they have whatever they need to do. If someone says fire, all those missiles are going off at once, because that's what they've been trained to do by a hierarchy, by a Buradic system, right? Excuse me. So the Buradic C, once more time, is a formal organization with a hierarchy of authority and personality of positions and written down procedures. So this is a typical Buradic structure of a medium-sized college or university. As you can see, you have your board, you have your governors, your trustees, and you have your presidents, and then you have your vice presidents, and then you have your college of education, then you have your department, and then you have your department chair, and then you have, someone like me who's on the sociology faculty. I'm on low man on the totem pole here. But if you really want to think of it, this is kind of like similar to a hierarchy that we have here at VVC. There is a department chair, there's a department of sociology, there's a college of human social science. So if you really want to think about it, then above that, we have the vice president, above that, we have the president. So it really just depends in regards to where you're looking and how you're trying to get all your information. But When orders come down, it comes from top down. So we follow the same type of system. There's a McDonaldization of sociology. This is kind of an interesting way to kind of look at it. You know, everybody knows the golden arches of McDonald's. We know McDonald's has those lovely Big Macs, you know, quarter pounders, chicken nuggets. Guess what? You can order the same menu that's there. What's locally in your high desert is the same as in China. It's called McDonaldization. It's the process by which ordinary aspects of life are rationalized and efficient comes to rule them, including such thing as food preparation. So even though this is in China, it still has the same food preparation as if it was here in California. It doesn't change. Menu doesn't change. Is it going to be extra on the menu? Yes, there will be extra on the menu. But however, when it comes to the standard, you know, chicken nuggets, quarter pounder, filet of fish, any of that, it's all going to remain the same. It's going to be prepared exactly the same. It's not going to change. So that is called, what they call is a McDonaldization. Goal displacement is one of those aspects to where even though an organization exists, that sometimes a bureaucracy takes on a life of its own. So what happens is that there might be a situation where an organization was created for a purpose, that purpose got resolved. Instead of for the company to dissolve, they do a goal displacement. They stay in place, they just change the goal of what they're working on. So to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about is the March of Dimes. It was funded by President Roosevelt in the 1930s to fight polio. When the vaccination for polio was discovered in the 50s, the organization did not declare victory and disband. Instead, the leaders kept the organization intact by creating new goals, right? Fighting birth defects was the new goal that they were working on. And then from there, after they kind of figured out how to help with the birth defects and that aspects, and then it changed to helping babies. Marching for babies, you probably heard that now. That is that's the same as March's Dimes. March's Dimes just did a goal displacement. They just changed the goal of what they're currently working on. So sociologists use this term goal displacement to refer to this process of just adopting new goals. That's all they do. They just kind of redo it. They kind of just, once it's achieved its goals, it no longer has a reason to continue, but it continues anyways. Kind of that aspects. It still uses its name to kind of keep itself moving. Technology has changed our lives fundamentally as well. The connection to each telephone call used to be made by hand. Here's a picture that shows it. In the 1940s, these connections were made by women, only women, not men. They figured that women had more of a approaching voice over the phone than a man does. So it was only women that did these jobs. Long distance calls with their numerous handmade connections not only were slow, but also expensive. In 1927, a call from New York to London used to cost $25 a minute. In today's money, that would cost about $300 a minute. And I could sit here and ask every single one of you, how much do you pay for long distance? And I'm sure all of you would say nothing. Right? We don't pay for long distance anymore. When I was a kid growing up, we used to have two different types of telephone bills. We used to have a local telephone bill, and then we used to have a long distance telephone bill. It was one of those situations, and my mom always used to get mad at me every time I would call, like my cousin that lived in Glendora. We like Glendora is not that far. It was long distance, so that charge was always higher than if you were calling locally. And then I grew up in South Ontario. So, when the phone number changed from a 909 to a 951, well, when you called 951, because the phone numbers didn't, or the long distance carrier and the local carriers didn't realize it was the same area, it was still considered long distance. So that was a whole nightmare in itself back in the day. Nowadays, there's no such thing. Here's your phone number, call whoever you want. It's not a big deal. There's one set price bill. Or use your cell phone. And if you want to call like London and Europe or any other like that, you just have to have the international connections going on with your cell phones, which is like a $10 monthly fee or something like that. It's not that expensive, but even still, now it's a lot easier to make those phone calls. So you can kind of see that the bureaucratic systems through our technology times have changed as well. When we're looking at dysfunction of bureaucracy, you have red tape. Red tape is just basically a rule is a rule, right? We know that if a fire truck comes around, we know we're supposed to move out of the way. We know if a police officer's sirens are going off, they're either doing one or two things. Either they need to get to an emergency or we're being pulled over. It's one of those two things. However, when you're looking at some of these aspects, um, and when you're looking at social organization, to be more sufficient, Weber reorganized the Braddock as a dark side in regards to it, when we're talking about red tape, the Baradicks can also change their rules in regards to because they think they are the law, so they could break the law at the same time. So that's kind of looking at the red tape aspects. Lack of communication between units. If you don't have communication between units, it's really easy to go ahead and blame somebody else. You could have a breakdown the aspects in regards to the way how Weber looked at the Braddock assignment flows and that type of aspects. He kind of looked at it in regards to if you have a lack of communication, you really can't have a flow that runs smoothly. So you can either have a Braddock alienation, you can have resistance to alienation. So it's kind of one of those situations you have to be careful. Here is an example of alienation. It's a Marx term in regards to it. It's how is the worker trying to avoid becoming a depersonalized unit in the Braddock economic machine, right? If you're looking at it, they just don't want to become this production, more or less. They want to lead to a sense of, they don't want this powerlessness. They want to feel like they're still kind of in somewhat power, right? That's what alienation is communicating. But when you're looking at like the dysfunction of Braddock system, here's somebody that's like, nope, I'm not going to be powerless. I'm not going to blend in. I want to stand out. I'm going to depersonalize my unit because I want them to know this is me. So if you notice, there's a doorbell here. There's a pot of flowers. It's like a welcome mat with a newspaper, milk bottle, and your lovely, black bins that sit outside of the cubicles. If you've never worked inside of a cubicle, that's usually like for your mailbox. So there's a mailbox being indicated. Usually people on the inside will put, pictures, whatever, whatnot. But it's one of those situations, there's not a whole lot of stuff. It's usually all work related on the inside of the cubicle. So they try to make sure that they don't fall into this machinery type aspects. So like I said, when it comes to alienation, it is a Marx term. It refers to workers' lack of connection to the production of their labor. Alienation, right? Weber kind of came up with the Braddock system in regards to when the assignments kind of work, the working of for a corporation, you have this aspects where in a Braddock system, assignments flow downward and the accountability rolls upward. That's just the kind of way how it goes. All the works get handed down the lines. Usually the low man on the telepole gets all the work, and then however the boss takes all the credit for it, right? So assignments flow downward, accountability flows upward. Excuse me. When we're looking at working for the corporation, we have these self-fulfilling stereotypes in the hidden corporate culture. When we're looking at this and we have this self-fulfilling stereotype goes back to the ideals of what someone is like that leads them to the person's behaving in ways to match that stereotype, right? Just like it did before, now it's into a corporate aspects. When you're finding those types of stereotypes, if you think about it, if people don't get recognized for doing the work that they do, they're going to start thinking they're doing something wrong. So they tend to preconceived ideals that someone is like actually leads to the person behaving in ways to match those ideals, right? So if you don't get recognized, somebody else gets credit for doing the work, and it's just like, what's going on here? Not the choice of words I want to use, but it's like, what's going on here? They get promoted, you don't. What's your demeanor is going to happen? Your personality, the way how you are, you're going to try to tend to match those behaviors that maybe you think the owners or the boss or the managers might think that you're that self-fulfilling stereotype might be. So when we're looking at the hidden corporate aspects, we're looking at the diversity within the place. According to Cantor and the research that was done in 1977 and 1983, the self-fulfilling stereotypes are part of a hidden corporate culture, which are just stereotypes of the traits that make for higher performing and underperforming workers. which end up producing both types of workers, right? So when you have this hidden corporate, you have that self-fulfilling stereotype within it as well. So, that self-fulfilling stereotype, if consistently hear that you're lazy, you don't do the work, you don't do this, you don't do that, or if you hear it through the grapevine or whatever like that, the problem is you're going to start acting that way. Like, okay, if I don't do the work, then why should I do the work? So that's that self-fulfilling. When we're looking at diversity in the workplace, there's been some diversity trainings, efforts to minimize conflicts among people of different backgrounds, to enhance their understanding of their contrasting backgrounds, to promote their cooperations, to basically reach mutual goals, often working in the settings. It's to make sure that that diversity within a workplace is kind of working together versus working against each other. So they have these diversities, they have these webinars, they have these trainings to make sure that everybody kind of understands, and they gradually work together, and they get more on a personal level. They learn to respect one another, not so much kind of hate each other and have that animosity, like you shouldn't get this promotion, I should get this promotion. But at least they're on the same playing field, and there's no kind of sporadic type aspects in regards to it. There's none of that hidden corporate culture behind it. When you're looking at the self-fulfilling stereotypes, like who gets promoted, who doesn't, and why, if you guys ever were up for a promotion and didn't get it, did you ever ask your manager, why didn't you get it? Kind of be courageous, step out of that box, ask why you didn't get it, right? If you ever wonder, like, why did that person get promoted? Like, seriously, he doesn't do any work, he's dumb as rocks, he's, whatever it might be. But at the same time, you're wondering, why didn't I get it? So it's kind of like one of those situations to where that's where that self-fulfilling stereotype. Ask why. What can I improve to make myself better? If I want this manager position, what do I need to do to prove to you I really want it? Ask those questions. And an employer is going to appreciate it more, that the fact that you come out of that shell and ask versus not ask, because then they're going to label you as that one person that you don't want to be labeled as. So it's a clumsy effort in regards to the diversity in the workplace. It's to improve, basically mentoring, kind of help with that. But they also put in the virtual reality as well. It makes it a little bit easier to do webinars when you have a big corporation. You could do the Zoom meetings, you could do webinars, you could do web conferences, you could do so many different things for virtual reality for big corporations to bring everybody together. So there's not so much diversity between the workplace. It's to bring everybody together and have everybody work together. So when we're looking at these aspects in regards to technology and the maximum security, as we're developing our technology and we're shifting the landscapes, we part of our developing of our surveillance of society, right? Our government is accumulating images of faces. This is as of now, it's currently in place, it's working now. The goal is to have the faces of all the citizens and residents in the government, computerized files, so any person can be identified immediately by face recognition software, even if the individual is just 1 in 8,000 in a crowd, right? They have this software that's being developed in regards to technology-wise. It's to help. It's actually being developed in Great Britain more than it is here in the U.S. But it's one of those things that's this is the future. This is where we're going. When we're looking at a bureaucratic system, we're kind of now on that low man on the totem pole when it comes to technology, right? If our face could be scanned in a matter of a drop of a dime and they could have all of our information on it, it's max security on society if you really want to think about it. But if you wanted to think about the coming of the security state, do you find it comforting that the government wants to be your basically parent and decide what is proper and correct for you? I mean, this is kind of where technology is kind of going, and making sure that we're doing everything properly all the time, every day. You know, does it give you a warm and fuzzy feeling, or does it make you feel like you're being more or less vulnerable in regards to having no say at all, right? So these are feelings and opinions that kind of need to go through the course of all of this as well when we're looking at the maximum security of society and technology and the bureaucratic system kind of all combining together. It's kind of one of those things to where it's a sticky situation, but at the same time, I mean, if you have somebody that's committed a crime and being able to find the identity and a face out of 1,000 immediately, okay, great, that's on that standpoint, that's okay. But at the same time, it's like I don't want all my information in a security bank on the government system that could be hacked and anybody else could get it to. So it's kind of one of those things to where there's not a warm and fuzzy feeling to have all my information to where it's readily accessible on the internet. World Wide Web, not that safe. That's just me. When you're looking at group dynamics, we have different size of groups. The effects of group size, the stability on intimacy, the effect of group size and the attitudes and behaviors, leaderships. This all has a dynamic in regards to your primary group, your secondary groups, right? When you're talking about group dynamics, it's one of those situations to where you have to be able to define it in a certain way. So when you're looking at the power groups or the power of peer pressure, um, they did a Ash experiment. We'll get into that. The power of authority. We'll get into Milgram's experiment as well, and we'll look at the global consequence. But when we're looking at the effects of group size and stability and intimacy, when you're looking at a dyad is two people, right? You have a lot of intimacy in between this, right? They're really close, they're tight knit, they're, molded very well together. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to give you guys a definition again. Group dynamics refers to the ways that individuals affect groups and the ways that groups influence individuals. So kind of keep that in mind. Once again, group dynamics refers to the ways that individuals affect groups and the ways that group influence individuals, right? So if you think about it, if you have a dyad group, which is the smallest possible group, two people, smallest group, there's a lot of intimacy here. There's that bond. It's only two people. That's it. When you're looking at a triad is three people. It's stable. It has correlations. But the intimacy is starting to fade away because now there's three people. It's not just two. It's stable. Yes, that's fine. You have three. The stability gets there. But there's a correlation that ends up happening. And that is the alignment of some members of the groups against others, right? So if you really want to think about it, the more group members you have, the more stable but less intimacy. So if you take this group size, they started as a dyad, right? They have a baby. They're now a triad. The problem is with this relationship among the participants that undergo the shift, when you give a birth, your focus tends to go more towards the baby and not towards the original two, the mom and dad in this picture. So now all of it kind of goes towards the baby. So that's where you have that correlation that ends up going, that starts to work in groups against one another. So the more people you have, it's stable, but less intimacy. So as I'm going to show this, you have a dyad, two people, one relationship, right? D, you have AC, you have a D and B. So you have 6 different relationships. So as you can see, as your group gets bigger, the more relationships you have. So it increases the number of relationships and group sizes, and it diffuses the responsibility. Okay, the bigger the group diffuses the responsibility. So if you have a family size at 7, you have 21 different relationships. If you have a family like mine that has a group of 10, do the math. You can sit here and draw out your lines. I have a big group of relationships. There's a diffusion of responsibility. Not. But it's one of those situations, haha. But when it comes to one of those things, when we're looking about relationships, there's a big group of relationships. So there's a lot of people that we have to communicate with to keep those relationships going within just my house. So you can look at your, typical house size. I would say between 4 and 5, you have 6 to 10 different relationships. So it's really easy to kind of come among in regards to how these sizes and effects kind of, like I said, the relationships are strong. It increases the formality and it diffuses responsibility. And then you have leaderships. And when you're talking about leaderships, you have instrumental and you have expressive. Instrumental is an individual who tries to keep the group moving towards its goal, also known as a task-oriented leader. That is an instrumental leader, right? And a leader in general, just a plain definition for a leader is someone who influences one another, or other people. They're able to influence people to kind of follow them regardless. So instrumental is the individual who tries to keep the group moving forward towards that goal. Expressive is an individual who increases harmony, right? And minimizes conflicts in the group, also known as a socio-emotional leader. These are the ones that don't like conflicts. They don't like basically stirring the pot or, having somebody mad at them, or they don't like that. That's an expressive leader. It's like, oh, you know what? We're going to settle this. We're going to make sure there's no conflict. We're going to come to the grounds. We're going to agree to just, kind of one of those situations. We don't want this conflict going on. Then you have different styles of leadership. And those styles is authoritarian. An authoritarian is an individual who leads by giving orders. It's someone that has that persona of being able to say, hey, you know what, you're going to go do this. And that person's going to be like, okay, right? They're not going to question it. That's an authoritarian. When you look at a democratic, this is an individual who leads by trying to reach some type of consensus. And then you have your last one, which is a laissez-faire, which is an individual who leads by being highly permissive. In other words, they don't really care, just kind of do your thing, don't cause any conflict. If there's no problems, I'm good. It's just easygoing aspects, right? So it's one of those aspects to where you have these 3 types of leaderships. And it's usually, if you have an instrumental leadership, that individual is usually an authoritarian as well. When you're looking at expressive leadership, you're looking at more of a Democrat or a liaison. They kind of go hand in hand. When you're looking at the power of peer pressure, this was the ACEs experiment. It's a conformality experiment in which the respondents often conformed to a group of strangers. And if we were face-to-face class, I would ask you, from card 1, card 2, which ones are matching, right? If you guys say on card 2, line 2 matches card 1, my question is, are you sure? And I'm sure you guys are all sitting here scratching your head going, yeah, I'm positive. And I'm going to ask you again, are you 100% sure? It's part of peer pressure, right? So underneath this research that they did, underneath the ACEs cards, they did this research. They had a total of 7 people. 7th person, first person gave their answer, second person gave their answer all the way down. And, the 7th person had the right answer. And when everybody else had different answers, that person kind of scratched his head and said, well, wait a minute, maybe they're right. Maybe they're seeing something I'm not. So he flips cards over, gives it a few minutes, flips the cards over again. The 7th person changed their answer to match everybody else's. Guess what, though? Everybody else just changed their answer again. So you can kind of see how when you're looking at classic, very, very classic experiments, that when you're under peer pressure, it's really easy for individuals to change their answer, even though this line is the same as this line. But if someone sits there and asks you enough times, are you sure? You're going to start questioning yourself, right? So that is the experiment in regards to that one. In regards to the power of authority underneath Milgram's experiment, how people just follow orders. I'll spit that out. Underneath this experiment, though, they used electric shock. Right? Experiment in which respondents continued even though they thought they were administering severe shock. If someone told you to do something and you knew you weren't supposed to do it, you're going to do it to make sure you don't get shocked. That's just part of the experiment, right? Power of authority. If you know that if you don't do it, you're just going to have this severe shock that's going to come back behind you because you didn't do it the right way, or they think that you didn't do it the right way. It's going to be real easy for you to just be and be like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just do it. So that is the power of authority underneath the Milgram's experiment, is that people will just follow the orders because they don't want to be shocked. So electric shock kind of has gone out the window in regards to that. They figured that it's unethical to shock somebody. So they don't do the electrical shocks anymore. And then when we're looking at the global consequence of group dynamics, right? Group thinking, it's collective tunnel vision. When you think of group thinking, it's narrowing of thoughts by a group of people leading to the perception that there is only one correct answer, and that even suggest alternatives is a sign of disloyalty. The reason why group thinking is kind of important, instructors, professors, we'll have you guys do group projects, and I can sit here and ask you guys how many of you love doing group projects, and I'm sure half of you are going, no, I hate them, right? And that's okay, because your first thought about it is there's only going to be there's, like either one or two people in the group that is just not going to do the work, or they're going to do it at the last minute, and you feel like you just have to do it all anyway. So, group thinking, right? That's supposed to be what group thinking is supposed to be about. That's that disloyalty aspects, right? You're supposed to kind of get away from it. The reason why instructors or professors have you work together, it's to get out of that tunnel thinking, more or less, right? It's to take your tunnel thinking that you have and collectively put it into a tunnel thinking to where everybody's got their thoughts and their togetherness, more or less, uniqueness, putting it together. Take the suggestions from alternatives. Don't just be so closed-minded in regards to saying, no, this is it, this is my answer, and that's the end of it. No, guess what? There's other thoughts than just yours. So it's to put all that collective tunnel visioning together so that way you don't feel that disloyalty. Okay. So there is a purpose, there is a reason why instructors do have you do peer groups, group assignments and that type of aspects. But from one of those things, it's, that prevents that group thinking from happening. It's that buffering zone, that briefing in regards to like, this is just, it's going to be too much work. We're not going to be able to get this all together. We're not, you hear all the knots, not, right? Stop thinking that way, and kind of you get that group thinking, that, cohesiveness in regards to group dynamics. But that's just why you have a lot of consequences that ends up happening in regards to group projects, is because you get that disloyalty or that comfort, and then everybody just gets their tunnel vision in regards to the way how they think they should be, put it all together and kind of come together in that aspects. If you guys have any questions on this chapter, please feel free to reach out to me.